Welcome to another episode of Rich Dad Stockcast. I'm your host, Denney, and today we're diving into one of the most talked about investments of our time, and that's Bitcoin. A lot of people are buying it, a lot of people are talking about it, but very few people actually understand what they're getting into, and that's dangerous. So today, we're going to break down the basics, what you absolutely need to know before you ever invest in Bitcoin. No hype, no fear, just the facts and the fundamentals that smart investors need. And to help us do that, I've got Rich Dad expert Andy Tanner here with me today. Andy's going to explain how to think about Bitcoin the way the rich do, with clarity, with control, and a long-term perspective. But first, if you're serious about building wealth, head to stockcastbonus.com and grab your free investing tools. That's stockcastbonus.com. All right, let's get into it. Andy, welcome back to the show.
Del, great to be with you. Great topic you've chosen today. Always interesting to talk about.
I can't wait to dig into this because there's so many questions I have for you. But before we do that, stockcastbonus.com, there's some amazing resources there. I know we're always adding to it. What do our listeners receive when they go to stockcastbonus.com?
Yeah, there's a choice of several things, and I'll let people go there and discover that for themselves. But we have we have free ebooks and courses of different kinds and things that can help people get organized. But most importantly, it's a first step. I've been on the warpath the last couple months about action because I see content consumption, and I thought, I told my kids, I go, if you want to watch content, great, your TikTok, whatever, just make sure your ratio to action is equal to the ratio of watching, because watching doesn't do as much as click and get paid, right? And so that's really what Stockcast Bonus is for, is say, what habits do I develop? What regimens do I enter in on a daily basis to get cash flowing rather than just thinking about it?
Fantastic. I love that. Okay. All right. Bitcoin. Let's jump into it. What exactly is it? Why is it such a big deal right now? Let's just start with the basics.
Well, I bought my first round of Bitcoin when it was, I think, $300 a coin. And I forgot about it. I remember I bought it because people were asking me questions about it. And I thought, well, the best way to learn something is do the real thing. So, let's go buy some and see what happens. So I opened up a bunch of different wallets, and some I were able to open, some I stalled out on or whatever. So when it hit 10,000, I told my wife, I think I bought some of this. I better go look. So I went hunt through emails trying to find old key codes and old stuff, and sure enough, I found the one that finally worked for me, and I actually started trading it, writing options on it, just like I would a stock, which was really interesting to watch that part of it develop. But anyway, I don't consider myself a Bitcoin expert any more than I consider myself a real estate expert. Now, do I have it? Yes. Right? Is it part of my holdings? Yes. But I don't know that I'm an expert on it. But I will say this: what is it? Well, it's labeled as a digital currency. It's kind of a digital commodity. It works in a blockchain system where it's an open ledger. And the people, that really like it, I think the number one reason they like it is it's decentralized. It's not, owned or sponsored like by a Fed who produces U.S. dollars, or a monetary policy in Europe that produces euros. It's not held by any type of central bank or central government. And so it's an open ledger that's spread across numerous computers throughout the world. It seems to me like it'd be, until we get quantum computing, I don't know that it'd ever be able to be hacked. It's just needs so much verification from everybody else. It's very safe. And so it's digital currency. Now, I guess that'd be basically what it is. A medium of exchange, if you will, where people will, it's a place to hold wealth. Beyond that, there's a lot of good about it and bad about it we could talk about.
I think we're going to dig it because I do want to know the opinion, like the opinions. Why is it the love or hate? But before I do that, I think it would be good to talk about how is it different from traditional stocks? Maybe we can go down that rabbit hole for a second.
Well, the way I think the way maybe to think about it even before we go there is, if I'm going to invest in real estate, I'm going to recognize that there's people that have made money in it and people have lost money in it. So I know that there's risk there. So I would go to someone like Kenny McElroy or Than Merrill or one of my really, guys that got a couple $1 billion under management. And I'd say, what are the hurdles and pitfalls? What is it that these people do that lose money in real estate? What are the mistakes they're making that you're not? Because they're absolutely there. And no one would think I was crazy by doing that, by saying, look, there's people that have made money in it, people have lost money in it. Tell me about the people who've lost money in it and the mistakes that were made. And if someone came to me, now I do feel qualified to speak about stocks and options. And if someone were to come to me and say, Andy, there's people that make money and people lose money, and what's the difference? No one would freak out if I were to say, yeah, there's some downside to both those asset classes. Bitcoin's a little different in that, I've interviewed most of the people that I've interviewed on it, are like college professors and early adopters that have done well. And they seem more dogmatic. I worry more about that. I think there's an upside to that, to Bitcoin, but there's also a downside to it too. And people often don't talk about the downside, and they often don't identify, what people have done to make or lose money with it. So there's definitely two sides of every coin. And if you were to ask Robert Kiyosaki, I don't like putting words in his mouth, but he would often say there's actually three sides to every coin. There's heads, there's tails, and there's the edge. And intelligence exists at the edge where I can see both sides, right? That's where intelligence is. So the ability to see both sides of it is probably as important as anything we could talk about.
I love that.
With that, I can tell you how it differs from a stock.
So
it's a massive difference, with stocks. Well, it's a huge difference. When you own a share of stock, you own a piece of production. You own some company that's producing some value, and people are purchasing it for the value. If you look at the foreign exchange market, I might take $1 and buy €1. Well, in the crypto market, I might take a stable coin and buy a crypto coin, an ETH or a Bitcoin. And it's just that they're not producing products and services. They don't have a packaging system and a delivery system and a manufacturing system and raw materials they have to buy, and they don't have a factory where workers are producing things for customers. Bitcoin just exists as a medium exchange that people have adopted, and it's the confidence that there's a real big difference here. Is that if I own, let's say I own some Citibank. I own a company. Let's say I own some ExxonMobil. I own a company. Let's say I own some Walmart or some Costco. I own a company, and those people are producing stuff every day. If I own a cryptocurrency, there's not any employees. There's not any packaging or shipping or things going on. It's just a currency in and of itself. So it's a massive difference. And we can talk more about why production is so important to own.
I do want to get into it in that question here in just a second, but I kind of want to go back to something we talked about just a second ago, and that's really the opinions of everyone. You kind of either love it or hate it. Why do you think Bitcoin generates such extreme opinions?
Well, Steve Jobs, I love what he said. I quote him a lot where he says, don't be trapped by dogma. And when something's new, often something's sexy, just because it's new. I do think there's some sexiness to Bitcoin. I think blockchain is one of the coolest technologies. I'm perplexed why blockchain isn't being used for other things more than to the degree that it is. For example, I think if you wanted to hold an election, to have a decentralized blockchain that verifies votes that way would be just fantastic. I mean, especially in, the countries that need it the most, where there's so much fraud, it would be phenomenal that way. So decentralization and cryptography. I mean, they call it crypto for a reason. There's some real cool technology about that. Why people become dogmatic about it? People cheer for their horse. They do. They tend to. Human psychology is people. I think it was at I want to say it was at Caltech or somewhere in one of those fancy, smart California schools. Boy, that's an oxymoron, smart California school. But some of those smart guys, they put some people in a functional MRI machine where they could watch things as they were happening in their brain. And they showed some people some information that was contrary to what they believed. In other words, very convincing information that what they believed was wrong. You take a flat earth guy in there, put him in there and show him information that the earth is round type of thing. And, it's the chemical reactions that go on when someone is accused of being wrong is akin to being chased by a bear. And I think, people that adopt it like it so much that any type of naysayer, well, you're wrong, you're this, that. To me, I don't care. I have a different way I approach wealth. So I think the reason the dogmatism's there is, once people plant a flag, they're going to defend it. I've had a lot of people on that have really answered some, I grill people on my podcast. I grill them whenever I get a Bitcoin guy on there because it's my opportunity to grill them and everyone else should, see me grill them. Sometimes the people, in the comments walk away and say, wow, that was like that guy wasn't able to stand his ground very well. And other people are like, oh, he stood his ground pretty well. But, real estate guys like real estate, stock guys like stock, business guys like business. If you sat down with T. Boone Pickens, he'd make a case for energy. If you sit down with Warren Buffett, he's going to make his case for stocks. If you sit down with Kim Kiyosaki, she's going to make a case for real estate, and they're all going to make good cases. I think in the second half of our podcast, what might be really important to talk about is how it fits in what you do. That's as important as anything else because, there's 3 or 4 things, I'd say 3 really big things an investment could do. Some do all 3, some only do 1. But what do you want it to do for you? Because if you come to me and you say, well, I want to buy it just because I want to be rich, that's a very adolescent approach, maybe a very beginner approach. We'd want to be more sophisticated. Just say, "Oh, I just want to make money." I mean, that's not how that works.
One more question before we go to break, and it could be a long question, and I think it's important for the person that's new to all this. Blockchain. You mentioned blockchain. I don't think the average person knows what that terminology means. Can you explain a little bit what blockchain is?
Yeah, I mean, picture a series of blocks in a chain, right? Even if it were just child's building blocks and put them in a chain. And they're hooked together to where what's a lack of a better word? It's almost you've got to unlock a block by doing basically mathematical puzzles. And so you have these really extreme mathematical puzzles, and the computers have to figure them out. And that's how Bitcoin's mined. And then you open up a block, and now that block is available to have data placed in it, like a ledger, right? It's like an open ledger. And it's got to be ratified and verified back and forth, whatever happens in that block throughout the entire network. And so, blockchain technology, there's 1,000 YouTube videos on that, 2 minutes and now, blockchain. What's more important is what are you going to do with it, and what do you want it to do for you, and what are your goals for it? And, where is it going to be in 5 years? And if you have a bunch of it, is that going to be doing what you want it to do? And so the real question is how does it fit into your portfolio? And as I mentioned, I experimented with some. I look at it very much like gold in my approach with it, which would be very unexciting to most people. And I'll get hammered in the comments for stuff which doesn't bother me at all because it's everybody gets their opinion for it. So that's just fine. But I think how you're going to use it is the more important thing. So we can talk about that when we get back.
Let's do it. Let's go to break because I can't wait to jump into that question. Listeners, we've talked about what Bitcoin is, why it matters, but now let's get into the investing angle. So when we come back, Andy's going to show us how smart investors are approaching Bitcoin, how it might fit into your real portfolio, and what traps to avoid. And remember, go to stockcastbonus.com, grab your free resources. The best investors stay educated, and that's what we're helping you do. So that's stockcastbonus.com. Stick around. We'll be right back.
So far, it's been great. I needed a source where I could really enrich my education through stocks. I didn't really have an avenue for it, and it's helped me a lot. The simplicity has really gotten me on the track to where I enjoy the learning as well as it's really solidifying in my mind. And like, they're not just trying to sell you something, they really care about the people that are in the course, and they really do care about you and your personal goals, and what you want to do is to help you and your family and whatever your goals are in life through that. So it's really been great.
Welcome back to Rich Dad Stockcast. We're here with Andy Tanner talking about Bitcoin, and now it's time to talk about strategy. Now, Andy, you've been kind of teasing us a little bit of the question. How does this apply to us? How do we use this for our own portfolio? So I'm just going to let you unleash here because I'm dying to learn. How does this apply to us?
Well, let's do basic financial education. If you had a financial statement, you can manipulate basically 6 numbers. You have income, expenses, net income or cash flow, right? Income, expenses, what you have left over. And then the other 3 numbers are assets, liabilities, and net worth. And so what number are you wanting to tweak with it? What do you want to tweak with it? Well, you're not going to tweak your cash flow number. You're not going to with a Bitcoin isolated. So now we've said, okay, cash flow is out the window because it's not going to pay me, like a dividend, or it's not going to pay me a distribution like rent. It's just going to kind of be there, more like gold. So already we see, this is going to be more like a gold investment. So now I look and I say, what place does gold have in my portfolio? Well, it doesn't cash flow. You could use it as a capital gain. And that's, I think, the reason most people get into it. It's not the reason I would, or that I did. Capital gain is a hard thing because when do you sell? And if you're going for a capital gain, eventually you're looking to have no asset. You're the only way you make money is if you sell it at a higher price than someone sold it to you for. So you really have to find somebody that's going to pay more for it than you. And the Bitcoin crowd advocates, they make a good case for adoption. They make a good case for scarcity. They make a good case for it, and it has gone up. They've been right so far. But for me, I like it mostly like gold as a hedge, to say, hey, if a dollar were to lose value, well, I have some wealth in another place that's not a dollar. So, for example, gold and silver is something that I have and own, and physical gold and silver. And so we also have some digital, as people call it, digital gold, digital currency. And that's fine. But I don't use it to cash flow. One of the things to think about is, this is a great way to think about it. Let's say you and I were on a desert island, and I own all the land. So if you want to live there, you got to pay me rent. And I own all the farmland, so I own all the food. And I also own all the fishing boats and fishing equipment. And when my fishermen go out every day, they catch all the fish. And you own all the Bitcoin. So you can be either guy. Which do you want to be? Do you want to be the guy that is on the desert island and owns the Bitcoin, or the guy on the desert island that can produce everything else? Good, sir. I own the electric company. It's really nice if I own the electric company, because now you need me to keep your Bitcoin alive. So, that's really good. So the idea that's pretty clear is that cash flows to producers. Mm-hmm. And that's really important. That's what I would call a generalized principle, that when I go to Costco, I see whatever currency, if we switch to yen, or we switch to the Sing dollar, or we switch to the Canadian dollar, whatever currency, whatever meeting exchange, gold, whatever, it's going across the counter for the person that produces goods and services. So I very much focus the main part of what I do. There's a couple ways to get Bitcoins. three really. Number one, you could mine it. That's probably, that's a big operation. You get your computers and you start figuring out, these problems to open up a blockchain and, get your share of the Bitcoin that's available in that block. Great. You can mine it. Number two is you could buy it. That's what most people do. They take $1 and trade it for Bitcoin because they think the Bitcoin's going to be worth more long term. They might be right. They're going for capital gain or a hedge. The third way you could get Bitcoin is by charging people in Bitcoins. And that would be my favorite long term. I'm not aggressively buying it now. I know Robert Kiyosaki is. He's, I spoke to him about a month ago, and he's very much deeply in that belief that it's going to be bigger and bigger and bigger, and he's probably right. But my philosophy is I want production, because if it does become a big thing and it replaces $1, okay, I've got assets now. My dividends can be paid for me in crypto, and my premiums will be given to me in crypto. And my, when I run a business or real estate, I'll charge rent and they'll have to pay me in crypto. So if I'm producing, I'll have plenty of crypto. The generalized principle hasn't changed for me. It's buy assets, buy income producing assets, buy assets that do work or give value for which customers pay for it. And off you go. So, is it worth buying a couple of Bitcoin? Maybe so. But I really love the idea of, I know that rent works. That's not an experiment. I know that dividends work. That's not an experiment. And that's where I put most of my efforts is on production. So that's where I do it. But if I want to charge people, and if Bitcoin becomes bigger and becomes more of a mainstream, I don't know that it will. It's kind of evolved in how people have used it. It hasn't had the adoption of everyday currency like people envisioned it would by now, but maybe it will. Maybe it will. Are you after the cash, or are you after the asset? I mean, to me, every single time I get cash, it's like having a goose that laid a golden egg. There's your reference, by the way.
There you go.
And so what do I do with those eggs? Well, I try to get rid of the eggs to get another goose. So, picture a world right now where the dollar was gone and Bitcoin was it. Like right now in the world, how would you fare? Well, I would fare just fine because I have income producing assets that would produce, cash for me in whatever form. So I really don't care what the what the currency is. I care whether I have the assets to give myself the position of being a producer. That's what I care most about. I mean, and there's things about Bitcoin that people in the comments will hammer on me, and that's welcome and invited, because everyone's opinion is valuable to consider, right? To say someone is smarter than me on Bitcoin would not be a stretch at all for me. I mean, I'd gladly step aside, for an expert on Bitcoin to teach us more about it. But I do have worries about obsolescence risk with it. If people are preaching, full-throated preaching on it, that it has no flaws and it has no downside and it has no weaknesses and it has, that it's perfect, I don't buy into that. I don't think there's such thing as a perfect asset. I think there's risk in every asset. And one of the big ones is obsolescent risk. There is absolutely, in my mind, a possibility that in the future, we could be talking about Bitcoin the same way we talk about WordPerfect or Napster or Netscape or Quattro Pro or Palm Pilots or DVDs or CDs. When I got my first CD player when I was in college, man, it blew everyone away. It's like, this is it. This is the way it's going to be forever. Well, no, we have far better ways to produce music and replicate music and listen to music now than a CD. Far better ways. And so when quantum computing is unlocked, what's the next field beyond quantum computing that we haven't invented yet? I mean, it's like saying, the dollar will be there forever because we didn't know what a blockchain was. Well, it could very well be, absolutely well be, that blockchain in the future could be, well, remember blockchain? You remember that? How interesting that was when it first came out, and how, it was really groundbreaking, but now we have this over here, this new thing. And so I just think that obsolescent risk, the way you look at technology grow, it's not this mainstay. Now, if someone gets in a functional MRI machine who loves Bitcoin, and I say those things, their brain's going to get light up like they're offended. And I see it in the comments. People get visceral. They get angry. Oh, don't you say anything about my asset? Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's fine. But I just look at investing. I'm not married to anything. I just want the cash flow. That's it. So that's kind of how I think about that stuff. So you got to have the good and the bad.
And I think you're right. I love that analogy of, intelligence is standing on the edge of the coin, looking at both sides. And I think that's a great perspective to look at Bitcoin. If someone looking at one side of the coin, they want to get into Bitcoin, what's something that I don't want to say advise, but what's something that someone should be aware of when they're getting into Bitcoin, getting into crypto?
I'll tell you how I continued to do it. I bought that first round, right? And so when I decided to buy more, by that time, the options market tied to crypto was beginning to blossom. Well, I shouldn't say blossom, beginning to bud. It hasn't blossomed yet. But if I were to look at a stock, and it didn't pay a dividend, and I still wanted that production, I would use options for cash flow, and that's absolutely what I did with Bitcoin and ETH, by the way, both of them. And I would get paid to buy it cheaper. I would put money in an account and say, "Hey, I promised to buy another Bitcoin." I started doing this when it was probably around, I don't know, 60 grand, somewhere in there, at that that mountain is 60. And I said, "I'll pay me this much." Now the premiums on that stuff were so rich because the volatility is so high. I mean, it's some of the richest premiums you can find, which tells you something. This is really important. The reason the premiums are so high is it's insurance. So if your insurance is high, it tells you how risky something is. That's really important. Someone who doesn't, now that I can speak with authority on. I understand very well the relationship between the amount of premium you pay and the risk of the investment. And the more volatile and more risky something is, the more premium there is to be had. So I would get paid to buy my Bitcoin. I mean, if I were telling someone to start out today, why not cash flow it through that options market? So you simply make a promise to buy it at a certain level, which you were going to do anyway, and they'll pay you ridiculous amounts. I mean, thousands of dollars now, with Bitcoin being where it is. You can pay thousands of dollars just committing to buy a single coin or even a piece of a coin. And then once I had it, I would write covered calls on it and cash flow it that way. Now, why isn't it my favorite? If I can do that with crypto the same way I can do it with stock, why isn't it my favorite? Well, the reason it's not my favorite is the market's very thin. It's not as liquid. As a result, the spreads between a bid price and an ask price are really, really wide at times. And sometimes it's hard to get to shave the spread on those to a place where you're comfortable. And what was really fun is I found it to be a gateway drug for a lot of people. There were so many people who never would have touched a stock in their life. And they'd say, I want to know about Bitcoin, though. So I did a class probably 7 or 8 years ago on how to do this, right? Cashflow Academy. I called it learning both sides of the Bitcoin is actually what I called it. Come to the edge, look at both sides of the Bitcoin. And I taught how to do this, how to get cash flow by selling options. Also important to be able to buy an option. You could collar a Bitcoin. You could literally do what Mark Cuban did with Yahoo stock. You could sell a call and use that money to buy a put and protect yourself through a volatile time. You can do all those things. So we put that class together, and people were like, "Are you kidding me? This is the greatest thing in the world." I had no idea I could cash flow Bitcoin. I had no idea I could get paid to buy it and get paid to sell it high, and had no idea I could do all this. I said, well, if you really want to see something interesting, see the efficiencies of the Bitcoin. And now look at the efficiencies of just like the S&P itself. And it was so much better in equities because it's more liquid, it's more stable, less volatile, that people are like, wow, this is really a cool way to make money. So if you're going to be in it, there's no way I would be in stocks if I didn't have options to protect myself. No freaking way. And I get very, very excited about stocks because I can pad my pocket with option money. And you can do the same with Bitcoin. It would be really important, I would say, to know how to protect your downside and how to cash flow. It's just too good of an opportunity if you're going to go down that road. But I would also say, understand what you're trying to get out of it, right? Because without options, you won't cash flow it. You should learn technical analysis. If you're going to be a Bitcoin person and just trade for capital gain, you should learn more about technical analysis levels. And then finally, you should know whether you want to just use it like I do as a hedge. That would be my primary reason for having it, which means like my gold, I never want to see the money again. And most people do not buy gold to never see the money again. They do not buy a Bitcoin to never see the money again. The best scenario in my life is that I die, and after my funeral, they plant me in the ground. My kids go, and the lawyer gives them the combination to the secret safe and blah blah blah, and they say, "Oh my gosh, look what we got." That would be great because it's for me, it's insurance. It's no different than my car insurance. I don't expect to cash in my car insurance unless there's a wreck. I don't expect to cash in my home insurance unless the house burns down. I don't expect to have my Bitcoin make me rich unless the dollar completely disintegrates. So it's insurance. That's the way I see it. But yeah, you can cash flow it with options, protect it with options. Absolutely, you should learn about options if you're in crypto. No question in my mind.
All right, that leads me to my final question. What's one smart action someone can do this week to get educated and avoid mistakes?
Oh, you give me a softball over the plate like that. Go to Stockcast. Go there, stockcastbonus.com. There are generalized principles that are going to be true in all cases, regardless of what asset class you want to dabble with. Start there. I know that there's shiny objects to chase, but there's probably also a pragmatic part of you that says, gee, there's probably some things to learn before. Kind of look at it like gun safety, right? If you were going to have something very powerful, go out and hunt your food and get your dinner, and great, but learn the safety first before you go out and start playing with guns here. And I would say the same thing about crypto. There's other things to learn, like how a financial statement works, how cash flows through a financial statement. If you don't know how cash flows through a financial statement, and you don't know where Bitcoin would fit into that, as a capital gain instrument, then you probably aren't ready to do it intelligently. It's my opinion.
I love it.
Just my opinion. Yeah, just my opinion.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up our show today. As we've listened to this, I think Bitcoin is here to stay, at least for the time being, but your results will come down to how you approach it. Educated investors, we don't chase, we plan. And I want to say big thanks to Andy Tanner for bringing the clarity we all need when looking at this investment. And if you want to sharpen your investing mindset even more, head over to stockcastbonus.com, grab your free tools. It's the fastest way to build smarter, safer, and more strategic portfolio. And if you got value from today's episode, make sure you like, subscribe, share it with someone who's curious about cryptocurrency, right? You're not here by accident. You're building something that most people won't. Stay smart, stay invested, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.